Hello everyone, this is Shadi Reyes from SIF 2022. With me is Dr. Tim Henry. He is the Endowed Chair for Learner Center at the Christ Hospital, and he's the SCI President. Dr. Henry, welcome.
Shadi, delighted to be here. It's great to be at SIF.
I can't believe it's been a year.
Yeah.
So last year we were just starting to go live because of COVID. So are we done with COVID?
Yeah, so that's a terrific question. You know, obviously there's been different variants and it's come and go.
Yeah.
But I think we've learned tremendously more about how to deal with COVID. And I think we have no choice but to go forward and deal with it. You know, I think there's no question in the last 3 years that COVID has dramatically affected cardiovascular care.
Absolutely.
And I think it's key to think of it. It has the direct effect, which patients with heart disease are at increased risk. We know that patients who are admitted to the hospital, about 20 to 40% will have an elevated troponin, and that they are higher risk. And we know patients are more prothrombotic and pro-inflammatory. And in a particular unique situation is patients who have COVID who present with ST elevation MI.
Yeah.
And so as part of SCI, we've had the North American COVID Myocardial Infarction Registry. We now have over 700, nearly 800 COVID positive patients who had ST elevation.
Yep.
So it's a remarkable registry that's been really done. It's a collaboration of American College of Cardiology Interventional Group and the Canadian Association of Interventional Cardiologists. And it's allowed us tremendous insights into how to deal with it. In our first publication showed that these patients have a much higher mortality, 33%, and that they're more likely to present with dyspnea and more likely to be intubated. But now we have a new late-breaking trial that we'll present next at ACC that we compare the outcomes of COVID-positive STEMI in 2020 with 2021. And suffice it to say, I think people will want to look at this because it's dramatically different.
Absolutely, and it's the NACME or registry for North American. The findings are dramatic. We are going back like 10, 20 years of STEMI care because of the complication we've been seeing because of these patients coming late.
So this is a perfect lead-in because the second half of COVID, so that would be the direct effects of COVID. But also what we've been clear are the indirects, and that's the public health response to COVID. So we recently had an editorial in the European Heart Journal about from Austria. They had 3 periods of lockdowns. And during the lockdowns, patients who came with a heart attack had larger heart attacks, more MVO, and more hemorrhage, and lower ejection fractions. And this was because when you scare the population, say don't come to the hospital, then they come in later.
Yeah.
So these aren't COVID patients. These are normal patients with heart attacks whose outcomes were worse.
Yeah.
And this occurred all over the world. We knew in the United States very early on that there was a 40% reduction in people coming to the hospital with their STEMIs, not because people weren't having STEMIs. And we saw this big bump in people having out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and dying at home, as well as a big bump in complications, late complications.
Correct.
So VSDs and ruptured papillary muscles and LV thrombus, all things that would be preventable.
We've never seen the last 10 years, and now we're seeing it again.
Yes, you're young. So it was like we went back 20 years in STEMI care because of it. And so I think if there's a lesson from this is, you know, we need to treat it like a disease. And there's things we know and things we don't know, but be thoughtful, this is a disease. And unfortunately, we let public health and politics get into it, which was a mistake, and I think, so hopefully we learn from it. And what we know is, that it can be treated. So vaccines clearly help, especially as you get older. It's critically important. But we also have other agents, including oral agents, that help for COVID. And so we should be cognizant. I don't think COVID's going away. No. There will be new variants.
But we know how to deal with it.
But we know how to deal with it. And the world should be open. The economy, schools should be open, because we did so much damage by the lockdowns and the things.
Yeah.
And so we need a balanced approach and go forward.
Absolutely. Final comments about also the volume in the cath lab has been changing during COVID for the same note. But also I noticed pulmonary embolism has been increasing, and I think because of the thromboembolic. Now I don't see it anymore. And because of that surge, new technology came into the market suggesting this technology, which was a good thing that we pushed the envelope in that direction. But at the same time now going away. So it looks like we are adjusting, cardiologists start to adjust and accommodate the different surges of COVID. So what's next? What's going to happen next?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it is broad. We've only touched the surface. Early on in particular, hospitalized patients with COVID had 20 to 40% incidence of DVT and pulmonary emboli.
Correct.
So there was a clear increase. And we still don't know exactly how to treat them from an anticoagulant standpoint. That, of course, is much better, especially in an era of vaccination. That's dropped off, like you said. But then we also have a situation, the vaccine itself. Vaccine is very effective in especially older people and people who haven't had COVID. But you have to be careful because younger people who had COVID and they've had an immune response, and now if they get the vaccine too quick, or a booster too quick, that can be triggered too much of an immune response. And then they can get myocarditis and pericarditis, which can be also a very troubling problem. Absolutely. So this is another situation. I always ask patients, have you had COVID? Have you had the vaccine? Have you had a booster? And the time point of that to help them get advice of what they should do next.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Henry, it was a pleasure talking to you. Now every year we have an update about COVID, but what SCAI and what your registry is doing for the patients.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing. I think SCAI really took the lead in terms of helping understand this. When we saw that people weren't coming to the hospital, we did a second still count campaign to get people to come back to the hospital. We were actively involved in trying to getting routine procedures, imaging, cardiac cath, bypass, get it back, because people delaying those things, people delaying TAVRs, all ended up into bad things.
Absolutely.
And likewise, we've been very aggressive at understanding the complications and how we treat them. So I think really SCAI did a tremendous job. But that's our job. And what SCAI should be doing is we represent interventional cardiologists, and we represent interventional cardiologist patients, and we should be playing the lead role.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Henry, for your time. Really appreciate your thoughtful comments. Please watch this video and others on SIF YouTube channel. This is Shad Reyes from SIF 2022. Thank you, Dr. Henry.
Thank you.